We're talking with Sam Telfer, who is the member for Flinders. Now, just tell us your shadow portfolios you're holding as well, Sam, for the Liberal opposition.
Yeah, great to talk to you. So shadow portfolios of shadow local government, regional planning and regional population growth.
Now, regional population growth captured my imagination. First of all, is it a portfolio that's ever been held minister or shadow in South Australia before?
No, it's a new one, and that's what's exciting for me as the shadow minister, because there's an opportunity that we've got at the moment in our state to really revitalise our regions, and especially in the shadows of COVID-19, people are looking at lifestyle and looking at job opportunities, and within our regions we've got a lot of positive opportunities that with proper government policy development we can actually maximise those opportunities.
Now, a bit like Bob Ross, paint a picture for us here. Is it a box of roses and chocolates, regional population growth, or is it more than just natural population growth?
Oh, absolutely more than just natural growth, because I think there's a role for state government to play, and as a shadow minister, I'll be holding the government to account on some of those policy measures. There are things that are obvious that are holding us back at the moment within the regions, and some that are front of mind at the moment, Ricky, are housing within our regions. Obviously, we're struggling with accommodations for all demand levels, and also things like childcare, where there's a bit of a gap in policy between the federal and state governments. But if policy measures were actually developed properly, these things which build the foundation for our communities and regional areas can be delivered properly, and the impediments that we've got in place for people coming to our regions will be removed.
Can we pick through those, housing and childcare? First of all, housing. You've got quite some experience in local government as the shadow, as well as a former mayor and LGA chair locally. There seems to me there's plenty of affordable land in regional areas. Why are we struggling to have housing supply, especially as the boom tapers off in the metro areas? Why aren't we seeing houses built in regional South Australia?
Yeah, absolutely. There's the pieces that just need to be put together from my perspective as a regional leader. And we've seen the stats on the number of people that are moving from metropolitan areas to regional areas, and places in the most recent numbers that I've seen, places like Ceduna, which have had an incredible 114% growth in the regional migration, Mount Gambier, Port Augusta, and some of our smaller centres, within my electorate, ones like Streaky Bay have seen incredible growth. We need to make sure that the planning policy levers, for instance, are actually geared to be promoting the opportunities rather than putting extra impediments in place. So that regional planning and regional population are two areas which really do go hand in hand. There's an opportunity for state to work with local government, but also with private industry. That private investment is going to be really key, and if we can bundle together opportunities that we've got within our regions to try and put together a product which a major developer can come in and do, I think that's where the real opportunity lies.
Well, I imagine with the state Labor government, previously they've carved off the McLaren Vale and Barossa Valley areas as areas where they would restrict housing growth. Surely it's in the interest of supporting that initiative to not just spray Adelaide's population out to the north, but support growing regional centres and regional towns.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where I was hoping that within the first Malinowskis Labor government budget, there might be some incentives, some measures that are a bit inventive or ingenious, but there was nothing in it, and I think that's where the role of shadow is going to be really key.
So have you got some initiatives in mind you'd like to see in a future budget?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why I think I'm developing those policies at the moment. Some of the tax levers, some of the stamp duty incentives which can be developed, or some of the opportunities to change that planning law, as we spoke about, to make it so there is actually incentives rather than impediments when it comes to looking at opportunities in the regions. We need to make sure it's obviously sensitive to the existing communities in play, but these communities recognise that without growth and without sustainability, our communities are going to end up at a point where we're not sustainable into the future. So there's opportunities for business which are really exciting. As I look around the state, there's so many economic opportunities that we've got if the right policy measures are put in place.
Well, as you talk about whether a community wants to grow or not, you see, and you've seen well and truly in the electorate of Flinders, the fall over of a footy league, a netball league, and splintering out and mergers of teams. That's where the rubber hits the road, isn't it? Is if population isn't growing, you're just going to have less and less families in the community supporting local community clubs.
Yeah, and that's where we have to get the basics right, the foundations right. So things like regional health, making sure we're investing in our regional infrastructure, making sure we've got incentives for businesses to establish or grow within our regions. If the state government get those basics right for the foundations, then community and private industry will be able to do their thing. But without them, there really is a slippery slope as far as the sustainability of some of our communities.
And when you mentioned childcare, that's the other one that you said is a crying out issue at the moment. Just what can the state government do to actually, I guess, get childcare operators into a particular area?
I think there's a great opportunity for the Education Department in particular in our regional centres, and often there are school grounds with capacity or even school buildings that have got capacity. Traditionally, the state government have seen childcare as a federal issue. It's obviously federally regulated and managed and funded, but there is a key role, I think, especially within our regions, for the state government to play to try and put together incentives, put together opportunities for private business to come in and work in partnership with local government, state government and that private industry to get these things in play. Often when they're first established, they're not going to be always economically viable, but there is a lot of demand within our regional centres and a lot of capacity within the workforce which could be opened up with proper childcare measures in place.
Now, Sam, another important ingredient in population growth is water. Your leader, David Spears, speaking recently on Flow, talked about his concerns that, if I can paraphrase it, Labor might drop the ball on this Eyre Peninsula desalination scenario. I mean, are we going to have to wait another 16 years of Labor government before we see this moving any further under a Liberal government?
Oh, honestly, we can't wait that long on the Eyre Peninsula, Ricky. The water supply is really at a point where this project needs to go ahead. I spoke in Parliament House yesterday on the estimates processes and the questions that were asked of the Environment Minister, and I was disappointed and shocked really to hear that, firstly, she hadn't actually met with the Site Selection Committee chair, the committee that's put together of local business and community leaders on the Eyre Peninsula to work out the best arrangements. And secondly, she hadn't actually even got a briefing on the project. You know, this is a $100 million plus project, and she hadn't even received a briefing. So there is a risk, and I called upon the government to make sure they prioritise this, because the long-term sustainability of the Eyre Peninsula really is built around making sure this water supply gets locked in place. We take a lot of ownership of water on the Eyre Peninsula. We know how vital it is for us, and we need to get these arrangements right.
Well, we expressed the concern here on Flow that this is starting to look like it could end up becoming a political football again, because you've got the former member who you replaced, Peter Treloar, chairing that committee, as you say, and Labor's never been within cooey of winning Flinders. Could it be that party politics ends up deciding whether this moves rather than the merit of what's needed for the community? Oh,
that's why we have to make sure that the merit and the need really does supersede it, because we can't have a scenario where in 3 or 4 years' time the water supply of the Eyre Peninsula is non-existent. It's a current handbrake on the economic viability of the Eyre Peninsula, relying solely on underground water sources that are variable depending on what falls from the sky. So this project has been talked about for a long time. There's been significant work put in, and there really is the opportunity for the government to work with this Site Selection Committee, which, as I said, it's local business leaders, it's local community leaders that are putting a lot of work in to make sure the recommendations they put to government are sound, are robust, and are actually going to be sustainable for the future.
But should the former government have locked something in before now? We had this challenge with the site selection. Should it have actually been something you had kind of locked in so the government had no choice but to proceed with it?
Oh, look, there's no doubt that there was parts of this process that would have been done differently in retrospect. There was a significant budget allocation that was made, and SA Water were sort of left to develop the project. I think there was a real gap in their processes as far as that community engagement goes. That's why Minister Spears recognised that gap and put together this Site Selection Committee and made sure that they were the ones that were actually advising SA Water and the government. They actually had local leadership, people who are on the ground recognising what the needs are, but also what the challenges are. So the process is going to be really key, and I don't want to rush this. I want to make sure it is right, the right location, the right size, and has community support.
Well, Sam, thanks very much for joining us during an important sitting day in State Parliament. Sam Telfer, Shadow Minister for Regional Population Development and several other portfolios as well. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, always a pleasure.